During a time of absolute madness for the Arizona Coyotes where everything is uncertain, it's time to take a look back and wonder where would the team be had something gone differently. It's time for the series where we ask, what if? What if anything was different for Arizona? On today's episode of Locked On Coyotes, we ask, what if Blake Wheeler actually signed his ELC in Arizona?
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlak right beside me. On today's episode of Locked On Coyotes, I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And once again, that does mean you'll never have to pay to access any of our content. I also want to thank Corey and Richie for showing up on our show, late last week, as well as the crew from Hockey Royalty for having us on their show. We had some great conversations to end last week, and then before we had a couple of days off.
Yeah, it was really fun to kind of take some time and talk about hockey with other people. We have been talking to a lot of prospect people, but like those conversations are about prospects. It's great to be able to talk about like current players too.
Absolutely. And in what makes it even more interesting now is we get to, on today's episode, talk about what could have been a current player, because we're talking about Blake Wheeler. If you guys do not remember, if maybe you weren't a fan, before during this time, but Blake Wheeler was drafted by the Arizona Coyotes in what year, Carl? Do you have the year?
I forgot to pull that up. Drafted in 2004.
He was drafted by the Arizona Coyotes in 2004. And
then Phoenix Coyotes.
Yeah, the then Phoenix Coyotes. And when his ELC time clock was closing out, Blake Wheeler refused to sign his ELC with Arizona. So then Arizona let him go and ended up signing his ELC with the Boston Bruins. That was only that short ELC period before he went on to the Atlanta Thrashers, now known as the Winnipeg Jets, and has been with them ever since.
Affiliated with like two teams who have like changed their names since his being drafted. That's just a very weird thing. Blake Wheeler not being with the Coyotes in a time where it seemed like the Coyotes could very well move to become the Winnipeg Jets. I remember that time. It was a little bit before I started seriously watching, but I do kind of remember the residual feelings of everything. Only to see him end up with the Winnipeg Jets. It was just very weird karmic timing. And it is kind of like one of the two players that get thrown out. Like, what if the Coyotes had been able to get something done with Blake Wheeler? And they couldn't. And Blake Wheeler went on to have a very strong, career.
Absolutely. And it brings me to the question, because obviously he was trying to think, like looking at the all trying to line up all the years here. So he was drafted. So we mentioned he was drafted in 2004. And then obviously his time clock came up in 2008. Around that time, that was the first couple years of Don Maloney's tenure as general manager of the Coyotes. Would some Coyotes fans consider that one of Maloney's failures, not being able to secure Blake Wheeler?
I would say so. I do think it was a bit beyond his control. Like, we kind of don't think about it as much now, especially because the Coyotes were able to get two like really hot free agent NCAA players. But the Coyotes around that time, I think the bankruptcy beginnings, and like a lot of people didn't want to play in Arizona. There was a lot of uncertainty. And I don't know how much I could blame that on Maloney, to be honest.
The whole timeline of everything is just absolutely amazing because I'm looking at just how everything literally went, came up to be on that because the I'm trying to think, look at more of the thing on here. How long did Gretzky's tenure last as coach?
Oh, you are really making me dig deep.
Because like this is all during this time, right?
Yeah.
There's so many aspects you have to consider of a reason why Blake Wheeler just like did not want to sign with Arizona. And of course, you mentioned a few of those. You mentioned the bankruptcy of things and like that. But I'm trying to think all the on the ice things. Like, is there something that he didn't like from that aspect too?
I mean, there's always kind of the like, what is this team going to be? The Arizona Coyotes were not good at that time. So do you really want to be on a not great team? And I do think that there was, a general kind of like, things aren't looking great in Arizona. Maybe I'll just not be there.
That's fair. That's fair. But again, there are all the aspects of the reason why Blake Wheeler decided not to sign. It's you know you can pick so many things because, like you mentioned, there were so many things wrong with the Coyotes in 2000s. The late early 2000s. Like the all the and during the aughts.
So Gretzky was head coach from the 2005-2006 season to the 2008-2009.
So that's when he stepped down right before. So he stepped down the year Blake Wheeler would have been in his first year.
Yeah. So Blake Wheeler would have played one season under Wayne Gretzky. And maybe that was another reason why he wanted to go to Boston. I'm not sure who Boston's head coach at the time was, but probably a better head coach than Wayne Gretzky.
I mean, let's also put it this way: Boston was a lot closer to a Stanley Cup. I think they were only about 2 or 3 years close to one, right? I think in 2011 was the year they won it,
Yeah.
and that was
So
2011 was Blake Wheeler's last year of his ELC. So
So yeah, I mean, he made the right call. It sucks for Coyotes fans, but if I am Blake Wheeler and that is my like career, I would do everything that he did over. But I do think like if he had stayed in Arizona for like the full time, we've seen him do with the Atlanta Thrashers to Winnipeg Jets, like he has become like a major staple of that franchise. I think that would have been like a very good thing for the Coyotes to have over the past couple of years.
absolutely, let's actually talk about that in just a moment. There you have a lot of things that we do want to get to still regarding our what if episode. What if Blake Wheeler actually signed his ELC with Arizona? Before we get to any more, though, we are going to turn to Carl for a quick word.
So I have a message from our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the sports development, league reviews, and news, including all of the action and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net is the best place for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. Definitely a good place to go during the Stanley Cup playoffs. Always great to check out BetOnline, see what's going on. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
So now let's keep going on this episode of Locked On Coyotes once again, we're doing what if Blake Wheeler actually signed his ELC with Arizona and didn't refuse to sign and kind of let the Coyotes have him walk or whatever. Because as we mentioned, his ELC would have gone through 2011, and that and like what the Coyotes were really bad during that period of time, but it took only a couple years before they would have bounced back to a somewhat playoff caliber team. Heck, in 2012 they made it to the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah.
If he stayed, what would have been different on that? On those early years.
I mean, I do kind of think that the Hansel, Verbata, Whitney chemistry just worked out really well. The fact that both Martin Hansel and Radim Verbata were Czech, I think, probably had some of that to do with it. I think I'm correct with that. But I also maybe would have been second line for that run, but that would have given the Coyotes, a second line center who around that time had a 17 goal, 47 assist season with Winnipeg. That's not nothing.
Exactly, right? I mean that, and that would have been that would have been a good time to have him. And not to mention, they were especially because again they went to the conference finals that year, so maybe it could have been an extra push. Would they have beaten LA? I don't like.
Yeah,
We can't say that because that's a little stretching because I think because LA ended up winning the cup, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even LA just kind of ran through the Coyotes in that conference final. But
and Brad Richardson has said that the Devils were better than the Coyotes. And I kind of believe him on that. There's no reason for him not to say that. But yeah, I don't think the Coyotes would have won the cup, and I don't think it would have done anything to necessarily cause that team to be any better. It wasn't a very well drafted team. There was a lot of problems in that era, so it would have been tough for him to make that big of a difference in that.
Exactly. But let's talk about the post 2012. Let's say, of course, obviously, he decided to do similar what we've been doing with Winnipeg and just keep signing contracts, I think, and just keeps extending it, just for the purposes of this show. Would the Coyotes have fallen in the in the later parts of the early 2010s, before they go for the complete collapse and to the McDavid draft?
Yeah, I think
you still think they would have?
Yeah, because as we saw this past season with Clayton Keller, having one good player on your team isn't necessarily going to save it if everything is collapsing. And I do think that Blake Wheeler would have been one good player, and I think he would have influenced the draft decisions a little bit more. I don't think the Coyotes, they were always looking for a number one center, and I think they would have had Blake Wheeler be that, and maybe they're not drafting position every year. Right. Who knows?
Or how about this idea? Would he have been used as draft capital? Would he have been used for bait to try to? It's hey, we have Blake Wheeler. He's been playing pretty well the last few years. We're tanking. Do you want to give us a draft pick or a few draft picks and a prospect or whatever?
I mean, at this, it maybe, but just the way that Wheeler stayed in Winnipeg, that almost feels like it would have been a tough call to make. Especially if he found out they liked Arizona, they really wanted to stay there, and we trade him in 2014 to get a better pick. That would be that'd be kind of a heartbreaking moment, maybe.
That's fair. I can absolutely see that. That's and especially if he signs a longer term deal, a 6-7 year deal.
Yeah.
Heck, even if you really wanted, if you really loved Arizona, this was pre the the pre-era before you cap your contracts at 8 years, where you can sign these people to like fucking 12-year contracts. Would that have happened? I don't think so, but
Probably not. No. I don't think the Coyotes were in any position to sign any of those deals, because that was something where even at the time we're like, nope, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. Uh,
no.
I am glad that the NHL decided to punish teams for doing that, just because it immediately put a stop to it. And you'd be like, it's not fair to Vancouver or New Jersey, but it's like, I don't care.
There's still a
Punitive
few teams.
damage.
There's still a few contracts left, right? Lingering contracts from that era.
Oh yeah. I was always paying attention to the Suda Parisi ones, and they're gone. That was the end of when I like really stopped caring about those super long contracts.
I think the Tays and Kane had a similar thing, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, that's not to worry about right now.
Yeah.
So it seems that you're on the fence that he would have been that Wheeler would have stuck around.
No, I think yeah, in like any kind of real life scenario, Blake Wheeler would not have stuck around, and I would not have like held a grudge against him. Like I said, I thought what he did made the absolute most smart thing for his career, and that's ultimately what he needs to be worried about.
Absolutely, and it ended up working for him once again. I mean, like he actually technically does not have a Stanley Cup because the year Boston won it, he was traded halfway through the season.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
But
And then just in Winnipeg for almost the rest. Got to be one of the most famous Atlanta Thrashers. That's always cool.
how many of the famous Atlanta Thrashers out there? You have Blake Wheeler, Koff or Vander Kane. Kovalchuk, via Kovalchuk. I think he was.
Is he technically back?
No.
Yeah. But yeah. And Dustin Byfuglien until very recently was, I believe. But yeah, I think Blake Wheeler would have given the Coyotes a lot more stability in the forward group that they didn't have and that they really needed. Like they were constantly pushing players to be a number one center. And did it rush some of them? You could argue it. You could argue like Martin Hanzal was probably given a role a bit too quickly. Whatever the team did with Dylan Strome was not the best way to do that. And thankfully, we're seeing Barrett Hayton not put in that kind of similar situation. But a player like Wheeler could have changed the philosophy of the organization a bit.
So it seems that just the biggest issue was it was a coaching and personnel problem.
Yes. Well, for so many of those years where, and that's what the reason I like this is because Blake Wheeler did end up sticking with his eventual team for years, and that's just a way to like look at the Coyotes. But like so many of the different regime changes were making the same exact mistakes. Like we talk about the Maloney era did not have good scouts, but the Chayka era didn't have that great of scouts either. So yeah,
for different reasons, all about numbers on that one.
yeah, and it was just like, and that's kind of like they made so many obvious mistakes, and Blake Wheeler I think is the kind of player where you're like, if you throw that in there, maybe you don't make that obvious mistake. Maybe you don't go with Dylan Strome over Mitch Marner. Maybe
maybe that, yeah, maybe a single draft like that, and as well as the actual contract signing could have changed that course.
Yeah.
Because like you've said it multiple times, a single player doesn't, drastically change the team, but a single player, but in my mind, a single player can change, like slightly alter the course and can make the rest of the years look vastly different.
Yeah. I mean, a single player can alter a franchise. Uh, it can't make the team marketably better. We saw that with Connor McDavid just not being able to drag the Edmonton Oilers out from the bottom of the standings for years on end. But it can alter just like how everyone operates around that and like how the team is built. Is Blake Wheeler a player who the Coyotes could have built around?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good question, Ness, and I think that definitely be the way to, the way to think about it, because like you mentioned the Connor McDavid situation is, eventually like, hey, you know what, we're gonna try to find you the perfect pairing, and then they ended doing that with Leon Draisaitl, like, oh, these guys work so well together, and they ended up becoming like a superstar duo.
Yeah.
Um, would the Coyotes have done a similar thing down the road? It's like, all right, like you stick around, we will find you your superstar like team like line mate.
Yeah, I mean, something that happened basically with Ray Whitney and Radim Verbata for all those years. Uh, here's the other unfortunate thing. The team did not pay players very well after during that time. Like Whitney apparently just wanted like a raise and couldn't get it. Like the way the team treated Radim Verbata still kind of annoys me. So
Because that was,
yeah,
I mean, that was a cash strapped team, right? They couldn't pay
it was.
anything.
Yeah, it was a very cash strapped team, but it was definitely not a team. You know, those kind of environments do not afford a lot of loyalty.
No, especially when the team went bankrupt in that in the late aughts, anyway. So like,
Yeah, yeah. Uh, that's kind of like the real like thing you have to like accept for would the Coyotes have been able to sign Blake Wheeler to an ELC? Would the Coyotes in some way have been financially stable and in a good position to sign a massive free agent? And yeah, they couldn't. And that is like a reason why, even though like things aren't stable for the Coyotes now, like they did get two like freaking star college players in a way that felt impossible over a decade ago.
yeah, there were like the Coyotes are definitely making a lot better choices. Bill Armstrong, I think, so far is doing a lot better than Shaker Maloney. So
Yeah, but we got another draft coming up, so we can kind of see.
oh
You know,
yeah,
honestly, that's something that does get overlooked. The Coyotes made a good decision to draft Blake Wheeler. Like he turned out to be a phenomenal player. It's good spotting. Just happened to
yeah,
be with a different organization.
yeah. I mean, you look at some of the players the Coyotes drafted, and there have been situations where the Coyotes draft a good player or someone who could be a good player is just not with Arizona.
Yeah,
Like
but
Wheeler, Kyle Turris to a certain extent, Dylan
sure.
Strome, like.
Yeah, but is that better or worse than drafting a player like Perlini, Byzantine, who end up not doing anything? Gormley, like find no success. Is that a better or worse thing?
I mean, in a way, I think it's a better thing because at least you can say, okay, the Coyotes did make the right pick. It just, like timing wasn't right for their development, and it just didn't work out with Arizona. If they stuck around and had the right training, then yeah, they could have done a lot better. Versus the latter, we're just like, no, that just didn't pan out.
Yeah. It's kind of like one of two problems. You either have a problem retaining your prospects or you have a problem selecting your prospects. And if you can't select good prospects, it doesn't matter if you could retain them or not. So yeah, it is, I do kind of like to examine the like, hey, the Coyotes had a hit there. They just didn't work out for other reasons and they're hit somewhere else.
Absolutely. And it definitely is interesting to just kind of like wonder all these different things. How many different things would be different if Blake Wheeler signed? Because again, like we were saying, is the team would have built around them. What would the team look like? Have looked like in 2015? What would they look like now? Would they still be on the team now? That's another question that we asked, and it's like okay, there's legit things. Like this is a legit scenario where things could have been very different.
Yeah.
And it's been a fun conversation because it's like, oh yeah, like this was a situation where they actually like versus the last one, right? Where we talked about what if the Coyotes drafted Marner, they would be in this they'd be in the same situation that they are now, still because it's like whatever. But in this, in the but the Wheeler situation, who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely. I don't know. Maybe in 10 more years, like the Strome decision will be like something that we are grappling with to this extent. But it seems like the Blake Wheeler situation, him not being able to be signed by the Coyotes, like there was just so much going on that like it's just because cemented is like an important aspect of this historical time.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts that you want to share about this what if, or anything that kind of peeked through your head that you might want to kind of share to kind of that I didn't even ask?
No, I do just want to highlight that I like players who stay with one franchise for a long time. So I very much respect Blake Wheeler and the Winnipeg Jets. And I hope he ends his career there if that's what he chooses to do. If he wants to go to a contender, let him.
Absolutely. We'll maybe talk about that like later if it affects the Coyotes in other ways, but who knows? Because you never know. Whatever happens in NHL, stuff is always happens to have some residual effect on Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona always ends up involved in some way.
Anyways, that's going to be it for today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your shows, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, on Instagram at LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. You can, I'm personally at Robyn_Leon, and Carl Pavlock is Carl Pavlock FFH. You can interact with us, ask the question you might have. We can answer right back on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.